I want to turn now to a hugely consequential but largely overlooked story that's been unwinding this week in dramatic fashion: China's escalating cyber espionage campaign against the U.S. and its allies. On Friday, the U.S. announced sanctions against China's Integrity Technology Group, a Beijing-based cybersecurity firm, over its alleged links to the hacking group Flax Typhoon, which has been accused of carrying out a litany of cyber attacks on Americans in recent weeks. American officials accuse the company of providing the infrastructure that enabled Chinese hackers to launch attacks against U.S. targets. The announcement of the sanctions comes after the U.S. Treasury Department disclosed earlier this week that Flax Typhoon had stolen unclassified documents in what it described as a major incident. Flax Typhoon specifically targeted a highly sensitive office at Treasury, the Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC, which administers economic sanctions. It's a key tool in America's national security arsenal. The attack also targeted the office of Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. OFAC's targeting underscores Beijing's determination to acquire intelligence on its biggest rival, according to officials who spoke to the Washington Post. China's growing cyber espionage operations, which FBI Director Christopher Wray called the most significant cyber espionage campaign in history, largely flew under the radar in 2024. But experts warn that such attacks are likely to increase as Beijing seeks to gain a competitive advantage in technology, economics, and security. Friday's sanctions are tied to a previous cyber hacking operation in which Flax Typhoon seized control of more than 260,000 internet-connected devices, including cameras and routers, which U.S. officials say the Chinese government used to spy on sensitive organizations. Flax Typhoon has been active since at least 2021, but U.S. officials say they were only able to wrest control of the devices from the hackers in September. The Chinese operation infiltrated numerous sectors, including universities, media organizations, and government agencies, in some cases causing significant financial losses as organizations scrambled to replace their infected hardware and their software. At the time, the FBI director characterized the operation to shut the network down as one round in a much longer fight. And just last week, a ninth U.S. telecom company was confirmed to have been hacked in a separate espionage campaign, this one called Salt Typhoon, targeting the U.S. telecom network. The infiltration of 9 telecoms, including Verizon and AT&T, also led to the theft of significant amounts of American data, including call records, text messages, phone calls themselves, and potentially sensitive government communications. According to the White House, Chinese hackers were able to geolocate millions of people and record phone calls at will. U.S. officials said the breach mainly affected U.S. officials and other high-profile political figures. Earlier this week, AT&T and Verizon said they no longer detected Chinese hackers on their networks. And in the past year, authorities have traced several major hacking operations back to Beijing, including the illegal collection of call data from the Trump and Harris campaigns during the election. A 2024 intelligence assessment by the Director of National Intelligence warned that, quote, China remains the most active and persistent cyber threat to the U.S. government, private sector, and critical infrastructure networks. With more on this, I'm joined by China cyber expert Sam Sachs, a senior fellow at Yale Law School's Paul Tsai China Center. Sachs has testified numerous times before Congress on China's technology and cyber policies. Sam, good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Ali.
China says these allegations are groundless. It's accused the U.S. of conducting its own cyber attacks. Is this part of a larger tit-for-tat dynamic between the two countries, or is this something that's as serious as what I just read sounded?
I think we're entering a period where cyber attacks are ramping up for sure as the U.S. and China enter a period of uncertainty in their relationship. But what's notable here is the level of sophistication we're seeing by Chinese hackers. You mentioned the dizzying array of Salt Typhoon, Flax Typhoon. We also have Volt Typhoon, which showed that Chinese malicious actors were pre-positioning critical infrastructure, saying in the event of a conflict, we can shut down power and water systems. So right now, I think we're in a period of potentially significant uncertainty in the relationship, and China's capabilities have certainly improved in ways that are very concerning to U.S. officials.
Yeah, Volt Typhoon, you just talked about. This is interesting. When we talk about a major conflict, at the moment we've got a potential trade war with China. What does major conflict mean? Does that mean if China goes into Taiwan and the U.S. decides it's going to stand up for Taiwan, that China has potential ability to disrupt infrastructure in America?
We have to look at cyber attacks as an extension of military power. And in the event of an armed confrontation between the U.S. and Chinese militaries, I think that cyber tools would certainly be on the table. And by showing up in utilities companies that are in places like Guam, the West Coast, what this signals is that in the event of a conflict, those West Coast assets would very much be in play. And cyber is going to work in conjunction with sort of traditional military powers. And so this is something that we have to be sort of very cognizant of.
There are a lot of calls, growing calls for lawmakers and for the Federal Communications Commission to regulate the cybersecurity of our telecom companies. I have to say, I'm a little surprised that it's not regulated. But tell me how that would work. Is that something that we should absolutely be doing? And why haven't we if we haven't done it yet?
The telecom system is built before an era of digitalization. It's the pre-modern era, and that's one of the reasons why I think our system was so vulnerable. The problem is hardening the telecom system would require essentially rebuilding it from scratch. How do you do that? There's a separate issue around critical infrastructure, the power and the water systems. That is something where I think traditionally we've relied on companies to make their own assessments of how much to invest in cybersecurity, in part because of the legitimate argument that the private sector may be more quick to respond to changes in the technology. And so government regulations could be outdated before they're even effective. I think now there's a real debate. Do these cybersecurity requirements, do the cybersecurity standards need to be required, particularly when we're talking about our water, our power systems, our aviation, our rail, or is this something that we need to leave up to industry to take a more flexible approach? That's a source of debate right now. The other issue is encryption. You know, the U.S. government is now calling for ordinary Americans to use encrypted communications devices, something the FBI for a long time has been hesitant to do because of the problem of going dark and the national security implications of that. So we're in a new realm here, and I think there's important debates playing out about how do we secure our systems in an era of strategic competition between the U.S. and China.
Is there leadership on this? Because I mean, I remember struggling since 2015, 2016 to figure out, whether we should be regulating security in social media and privacy in social media. And we had congressional hearings where people clearly didn't even know how to use their phones. Are we having real discussions about this that we should be having, or are you and I just having this discussion?
You know, the Biden administration took significant steps to increase cybersecurity standards. The question now as we go into the Trump administration is what happens in an era where I think there's a lot of questions about what does it mean to take a sort of hardline approach on regulation in these emerging technologies. In some cases, these are technologies we don't even know what the implications of them are going to be in the future. So how do you regulate that? One of the questions I've had is on federal privacy law. This is where privacy and cybersecurity intersect. So for example, the previous era of Chinese hacks, Equifax, Office of Personnel Management, the data that was exfiltrated was not secure. So do we need to have requirements on how sensitive data is stored? How long can it be kept? And that's a separate question. Will Congress move forward on a federal privacy law?
Sam, good to talk to you. Thank you for this. Sam Sachs is a research scholar in law and a senior fellow at Yale Law School's Paul Tsai China Center.